Welcome back, everyone. So in today's lesson, we're going to cover how to calculate better and blunder less in chess. And the aim of this is to get your chess improving as much as possible in the shortest amount of time. Calculation is just one of those most important things we need to focus on. And we're going to do that by covering these 4 principles on the right-hand side. And as always, we're going to cover these principles in example form. So these are some of the examples that we're going to cover. The last example we're going to cover for the concepts is from one of the Kasparov versus Karpov games from 1990. So stay tuned to see how that one plays into here. But yeah, I think there's definitely a scope for a part 2. There's definitely more than just these 4. So if you guys get value out of this video, drop a like, drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know if you want to see a part 2. But for now, let's crack into this. The 4 principles that we're going to cover: don't leave your pieces or pawns undefended. Always aim to calculate 1 move more than you think is needed. This one's absolutely essential. Number 3, watch for back rank mate. And number 4, remember that some moves are more critical than others, so you're going to have to spend more time calculating them, but therefore spend less time calculating the less critical moves. No moves are created equal. No positions are created equal. So first position we're going to look at is this one. As you can obviously see, white is putting pressure on that d5 pawn, and white wants to figure out, okay, can I actually win that pawn? So we start off calculating by saying c takes d5, knight takes d5. This is all in your head. Knight takes d5, c takes d5, queen takes d5, and okay, I think we've won a pawn as white. So you end up playing that. C takes, knight takes, knight takes, c takes, queen takes. And yes, we've won a pawn. Uh-oh, no we haven't. We've just blundered back rank mate. This is a perfect example of why it's important to calculate from this position 1 move more than you think is needed. So here, if you thought you needed to stop here with you winning a pawn, you were wrong, because if you'd calculated 1 move further, you would have seen that you actually lose the game. So how do we get around this? This is actually this is showing the importance of number 3, watch for back rank mate, and number 2, always aim to calculate 1 more move than is needed. So white here is pretty much saying, okay, well, I can't win that pawn because I've calculated 1 more move ahead, and I'm going to get back rank mated. So I need to protect my back rank. So what might white do? Well, white might play something like h3 to create Luft. So Luft is a German word meaning air, like the German airlines Lufthansa. And that creates a move like h3 or g3, creates air for the king to breathe, breathing space, essentially. So if the queen comes down to c1, the king can escape to h2. Okay, so now we say maybe we could play h3. So we play h3. And then black says, okay, well now my pawn is actually undefended. So as black plays rook d8 to defend that pawn. But this is where it gets interesting. So if we're white, let's calculate it again. C takes, knight takes, knight takes, pawn takes, and the queen can't take because the rook takes the queen, right? But hang on a second. Don't we have rook down to e8 as back rank mate? Yes, we do. Okay, so let's play it. Let's try it out. We play that. Black takes this way. Black takes this way. Sorry, we take this way. Black takes that way. And then the queen takes. And now we feel really good about ourselves, right? Because we've tricked black. Because if black takes, we now back rank mate black. And now we think we've surely won a pawn now. But no, we haven't again. Or have we? What about if black plays queen c1? Of course, we can come out this way, right? But again, we forgot to calculate 1 more move than is required. let's just say we go back. Isn't this a draw now? Check. It's perpetual, right? So we have to play g3. And then black has to come back down here. And now we move our queen out of the way. And we're a pawn up. But again, no. Because if we stopped calculating here, we would miss this move. Check. Takes. And then the rook takes. And after all of that, after 9 moves for each side, we have gone into an endgame that's equal. And if anything, white's the one that's more in trouble. They've got the pawn structure that's a little bit looser than black's. How did this even happen, right? So let's go back a few moves. Let's go back to the start, actually, and think about the position that we started with, right? So all these themes that we were thinking about, that we're talking about, come into play. Leaving your pieces undefended, that d5 pawn. Always aiming to calculate one more move than is required. Watching for back rank mate. And watch this. So in this position, we recognize that the main pressure in the position comes onto that d5 pawn. So we played, not that, we played h3. And then once black played rook d8, we thought we were safe because we had the trick. But again, it just shows how much you have to just pause and think. So in this position, let's try to do it without moving the pieces. So c takes d5. Okay. Knight takes d5. Knight takes d5. E takes. Queen takes. Now that opens up that whole c file for the queen. Queen to c1. The king has to come here. Queen to f4. The pawn moves to g3. This is like a Hikaru Nakamura video all of a sudden. Queen takes f2, takes, and then the rook takes the queen on d5. So all this stuff is almost forced. So it's in theory, it should be quite simple to calculate, because once black plays queen to c1, for instance, there is only one move, king to h2. When the queen moves here, it's a check, it's a forcing move, so it should be an obvious move to find. It should be obvious that the only move is g3. And then from there, it's just about looking one more move further ahead. So if we just go forward to this. So here, if we stopped calculating, all we needed to do was look one more move ahead. And what's the most forcing move in this position? It is queen takes f2. So that's how you'd spot this in a game. It's not too far-fetched. This is, I think anyone over 2,000 rating should be able to see this pretty easily. But even if you're 1,500 rating, I think this should be pretty straightforward if you spent 1 or 2 minutes on the position just thinking and not rushing. So, okay, let's take a look at the next example. This is, if we look at the very first position, this is a very similar position, except can you see the only difference? The only difference is we've just gotten rid of the f7 and b2 pawns and moved the king to the corner here. So why is this position, why are we going to look at this position? Well, just to literally illustrate what happens if we play that same sequence of moves. Knight takes, c, queen takes, check, there, 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 queen takes f2, takes, takes, and now we've got back rank mate. So what was the difference in those two positions? It was, where were we? Not that one, this one. g3, queen takes, takes, takes. The difference is, in this position, black is protected. The rook cannot get to f8. In this position, black's still open to an f8 back rank mate. So again, it shows that even how white played h3, Not in this specific position, but black should be looking to do the same at some point. h6. Again, you'll lose a pawn straight up here, but in a position like this one, for instance, at some point, it's in both players' favor to create lift. So when you see players move their h-pawn forward to create a bit of space for their king, it's because it enables a whole bunch of tactics like this to flow on from there. Okay, so that should hopefully start giving you some examples for those principles. So this example that we're going to go over is about undefended pieces. So if you pause the video here, or if you just, while I'm speaking, have a think. So it's black to move here, and black wants to exploit white's undefended pieces. Can you see the one piece in white's position that is undefended? I'll give you 3 seconds. 2, 1. That b2 pawn. But how is black going to get to that? Well, this diagonal is pretty weak actually, when you look at it, right? And a queen on b6 targets that b2 pawn and the king. Okay, so now we start thinking. We identify where are the undefended pieces in the position. That one. Okay, how can I target it? With a queen to b6. So I've got a couple of moves here. I can, as black, I can go c4, and that bishop's trapped. And once white takes it, I can go queen to b6 check, and take here, attacking that c3 knight, and ripping apart white's pawn structure. And once I play b5, I might actually be slightly better here as black. It's still a pretty equal position, but my pieces are starting to have quite a lot more flexibility, and my pawn structure is a little bit more stable as black. Another way I can approach it, queen to b6 instantly. Now I'm threatening c4 check, winning that bishop, and I'm threatening this pawn. So if white plays something like this, black just wins that pawn. Nice and easy. Doesn't even have to give up that c5 pawn. So white would have to play knight to a4, and after something like queen to a7, c4, stopping black from playing b5, black would play e5, and the computer says black has the advantage here. Slight advantage, but black's got a pretty good grip on that b4 square, and you know, if white plays something like takes the pawn, knight to g4 creates all sorts of mayhem in white's position, and at the end of this, white's going to lose that e5 pawn and has no control on that d4 square, so that's a nice outpost for a black knight, and white is stuck with a bad bishop and a strange knight on a4. So black has the advantage in this position. But it all started with looking at this position and trying to spot which pieces in the opponent's position are not defended, and it was that one. And we found tactics to exploit that undefended piece. But if you're not even thinking like that, you'll never spot this weakness on b2. You'll probably just play something like b6 or b5 or rook to d8. You'll play a slow move, but you actually have a tactical opportunity to take advantage of that undefended piece. Probably a more extreme example of undefended pieces, this one. So currently there are no undefended pieces in either side's position. Everything's defended. It's a pretty symmetrical position. Hang on a second. I have left a rook out of this position, so I'll add a rook in so it's not looking strange. And I have actually left another piece, so let's, excuse me there, and put that one in there. Okay, now we're good to go. So here, that piece looks a little bit loose. That's the loosest looking piece, but it is defended. But that's when you start thinking, okay, maybe as white, I can start putting pressure, right? putting pressure on that c6 knight. So this is where if black is not paying attention, if black gets complacent and plays something like knight to d7, what was that knight defending? It was defending that h7 square. So now this is absolutely catastrophic because white's going to win that knight because black has to address this checkmate threat, probably has to move the knight back, and that's when you lose that piece. So even if something is defended, you have to think about when you play a move, what are the tricks that can happen for my opponent to add an extra attacker to that piece when it's only defended once. And it's an important piece. This pawn is also quite loose, but there's no way to get to it. But again, down the line, maybe that's a pawn that white will be able to exploit, but not just yet. But in these kind of positions, you just have to be mindful, right? Black might be thinking, well, I want to play e5 and break open the position, so I'm going to play knight to d7, and that just leads to a lost position. Now, the very last concept that we're going to cover, and this is about how to manage your time on the clock, whether you're playing a blitz game, whether you're playing a classical game, you're going to want to recognize when to spend more time than other positions. And there's two types of positions you want to look for to help you, just as a general rule of thumb, understand when to spend more time than other positions. And that's looking at a position and saying, is it a strategic position or is it a tactical position? So if it was a strategic position, it usually means there's not many tactics happening. The pawn structure is pretty stable, like this one. This is a strategic position. Any play is centered around improving the position of your pieces. For instance, white's going to naturally want to try to get a swing a knight to e5 or possibly to f5. So these two squares for the knight, they're the best squares, and white's going to be mostly thinking about which of the two is a better square for my knight. And alongside that, am I controlling these files enough? Can I control them more? Can I win control over those files so that my opponent doesn't have any control? How can I get my queen to a better position? What are the weak squares? Like that pawn is quite weak. So in this position, you can play pretty intuitively. No single move is really going to lose you the game unless you, unless you play something stupid like rook to e6 and you just lose your rook on the spot. But there's many moves that white can play. We'll come back to this position, but compare that to this position. Now, this is Kasparov versus Karpov in one of their matches from 1990. And this position is absolute mayhem of a position. In this position, white as Kasparov, white played knight to h6. Knight takes h6. So white sacrificing a knight, taking a pawn that's defended not only by a rook, but also by a pawn. And what did black play? c3, attacking the bishop. And white didn't even move the bishop back. They just moved the knight back and lost the bishop and brought the queen out. So this is a type of position. If I go back to, where was this? Back to here. So back to knight takes h6. When Kasparov took that pawn on h6, Kasparov knew, okay, these are the types of positions where I should be putting enough time on the clock to let me think through all the tactical variations of this position, because there's so much tactical nuance. And this is one of those great games of chess history. Just to rattle through it for anyone who hasn't seen it. I won't spoil it. I won't spoil it all the way, but let's just say king to h2 was probably one of the best moves I've ever seen in my life. And it's the #1 computer move. And I don't think anyone less than sort of 2,400 rating would have spotted that to be the best move in this position. And again, it plays alongside that back rank concept that we're talking about. The king goes to a little bit of a safer place. And now if the queen ever comes onto that e file, or if that pawn ever promotes to a queen, it doesn't come with the check. So this is a position where you really have to think tactically. You've got to put enough time in to be sure of your moves, because every move you play could win or could lose you the game. Whereas in this type of a position, you can play several moves. You can play rook to e3 to double rooks. You can play maybe not knight to e5, but you can play rook to e8 and trade. So you can play something like take, take, queen a4, put pressure on a7. Once the rook swings around, you can play rook c6, bring your queen back to c2, take control of that c file. It's more of a strategic battle, and this is the concept of time management. So in this type of a position, you want to be spending enough time on the clock to make sure that you don't lose the game, and also make sure that you win the game tactically. That's how you win more games. And in this position, recognize that at some point the game is going to become a little bit more stale. It's going to not stale in terms of enjoyment, but just in terms of tactics. There's not going to be as many tactics, so you're going to have that opportunity to play a little bit quicker potentially. But at some point, the tactics will pick up. Like, even if you think back to this position, this very first one, it wasn't a very tactical position, but it kind of quickly became pretty tactical because there's some tactics you've got to analyze in there. You've got to be mindful of those back rank mates, not to lose a pawn as black, how to win the pawn as white. So you've got to, but it is a pretty strategic position, and it is in a way similar to this type of a position. So anyway, those are the 4 concepts for how to calculate better and blunder less in chess that we're going to cover today. Let me know if you want to see a part 2, because there's some other concepts that I can cover, but just for the sake of time, I'll leave it here for now. Hope you enjoyed the video. Smash it in your next games, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.